Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing good and having a chill day because we've got some new stuff to talk about in Hollow Knight Silksong. Yeah, that's right. The game that basically had the whole community in a chokehold waiting for any kind of news finally just got a new update, patch 1.0.28891. And before anyone says it, no, this isn't some massive DLC drop or a huge story expansion, but it's still a really solid update that brings a bunch of much needed fixes, tweaks, and small improvements that actually make a noticeable difference in how smooth the game feels. If you've been playing Silksong since launch, or maybe you picked it up recently, this patch is definitely something you're going to want to know about because it irons out some annoying bugs, improves controller support, and even makes a few balance adjustments that could change how certain tools and skills feel during combat. So let's talk about what's going on here. This patch is labeled 1.0.28891. And while the name doesn't exactly scream excitement, what it does under the hood is pretty nice. Team Cherry seems to be quietly but steadily working to make Silksong feel as polished as possible post-release. It's not one of those updates that completely changes the game from the ground up, but it's like that kind of patch that just smooths out the rough edges you didn't even realize were bugging you until they're suddenly gone. And that's honestly what this game needed right now. Stability, refinement, and a bit of love for the smaller systems. One of the first things that stands out in this patch is the controller improvements. Now, for a lot of people, especially those who've been playing on PC or macOS, controller behavior has been a little inconsistent. This update brings full support for the DualSense Edge, which is Sony's premium PlayStation controller. That means all those extra triggers and customizable layouts actually register properly in Silksong now. But beyond that, it also improves controller compatibility overall on macOS. And here's something I really appreciate. They added an auto pause feature for when your controller disconnects. If you've ever been in the middle of a fight or exploring some super tricky platforming section and your controller battery just dies, you know how frustrating it is to get punished for something like that. Now, the game just pauses automatically when that happens. It's a small detail, but it's one of those quality of life touches that make a big difference in how user-friendly the game feels. Another big part of this patch is the long list of bug fixes. And we're not talking about one or two little tweaks here and there. This update really focuses on squashing a bunch of weird glitches that were affecting progression, combat, and even some of the tools. For example, there was this issue where players could end up getting stuck in a cursed state late in the game. It's one of those bugs that sounds kind of vague, but if it's ever happened to you, you know how annoying it can be. It basically made some encounters or transitions soft lock your character. Well, that's gone now. They also cleaned up a bunch of out-of-bounds exploits, which some people were using to skip certain sequences or reach areas early. While speedrunners might be a little sad about that, for most players, it just means fewer chances to accidentally break your save file by wandering somewhere you weren't supposed to. And speaking of progression issues, one of the nastiest bugs that's been fixed in this patch is the one with spool fragments. There was a situation where if you picked one up and then quit the game immediately after, it could actually become permanently missable. That meant you could lose access to part of your upgrade progression entirely, which is the kind of thing that can really sour a playthrough. Thankfully, that's fixed now, so you don't have to worry about missing fragments forever just because you had to log off right after grabbing one. There were also a few soft lock situations, especially during the Grand Gate sequence. Those moments where the game would just refuse to let you continue, forcing you to restart or reload a checkpoint. Those are now gone too. So the pacing in those sections should feel much smoother. Now, one thing that I really appreciate about Team Cherry is that even though they're not the fastest studio when it comes to releasing content, they care about polish. And this patch reflects that in the combat tweaks and balance changes they made. A few tools got adjusted in ways that make them feel a lot more balanced and satisfying. Sharp Dart and Cross Stitch both got small buffs. They're not completely overhauled or anything, but the tweaks make them feel a bit snappier and more useful in mid-combat situations. It's the kind of change where if you already liked those tools, you'll notice they just feel right now, and if you didn't use them before, you might actually find them more appealing. On the flip side, some things got adjusted down a bit. Threadstorm, for example, was apparently scaling a little too well with higher needle levels, so they've toned that down slightly. Slightly. It's not nerfed into the ground, but it's more in line with the other high-tier Silk skills now. And speaking of Silk skills, Rune Rage got a bit of a correction in its damage scaling. It's now consistent with how other Silk-based abilities grow. These small adjustments make the overall combat balance feel more even, where no single skill completely outshines the rest. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of fine-tuning that keeps the game feeling fair, without taking away the satisfaction of mastering your favorite abilities. And I gotta say, one of the more understated but cool fixes in this patch is the one involving the Eva Hunter crest. There was this weird bug where you couldn't unequip it properly under certain conditions, which could mess with your setup if you wanted to experiment with different tool combinations. That's been sorted out now. There's also a fix for the harpoon tool. Apparently, it was sometimes granting you 2 Silkon when used in specific ways. That's been corrected, and crafting kits now properly boost blue tool damage where they didn't before. Basically, a whole bunch of little inconsistencies that added up over time are now gone. And let's talk a bit about bosses, because there were a few fights that could act up in strange ways, depending on how you approached them. The patch notes specifically mention fixes for encounters like Seth, Crust King Khan, and even the Surgeons. From what it sounds like, these fixes mainly address behavior and stability issues, like attacks not triggering properly or certain animations causing temporary freezes. These are the kind of bugs that might not ruin the game, but they can definitely pull you out of the immersion when you notice them. With those cleaned up, the fights should feel smoother and more responsive, especially during those intense moments when every frame counts. It's actually kind of cool seeing how much attention Team Cherry is still giving to Silksong's stability and playability even months after launch. Um, they didn't just throw the game out there and move on. They're still actively patching, refining, and improving it, which honestly gives me some confidence that they're in this for the long haul. They've even mentioned that more controller fixes are planned for future updates, which probably means they're not done polishing the technical side yet. So if you're on macOS, or if you use something like a third-party controller that didn't always behave properly, you can probably expect more improvements soon. Now, I know some people might be hoping for more content news, or maybe even a tease for new areas or story expansions, but this patch isn't that kind of update. It's more of a clean the house and make everything shine type of patch. But honestly, I think that's exactly what the game needed right now.